Welcome, Jodi. We're very excited to have you here in Australia. I've got a few questions here from some of your fans. Bodhi asks, how would you like to be remembered in years to come?
So I think I'd certainly like to be remembered as a great mom on a personal level. But for readers, I think I'd really like to be remembered as an author who made you think about topics that you might otherwise not have addressed.
Lyndall's question is, how do you put yourself in the shoes of others so well? You have me feeling compassion for every character, even when they would usually just be the bad guy. How do you write in grey when life is so black and white?
Well, I disagree. I don't think that life is often black and white. And I think that if you create characters that are only in black and white, then that's too simplistic. So the way that I try to make you see a whole character is to really let you walk in that character's shoes through their voice. The way I do that is by doing my research. I never write anybody unless I have met with and followed and shadowed and studied people who have actually lived the lives that I'm writing about. Because very often, the people I'm writing about have experienced things that I myself have never experienced. So I think that, for example, in a book like Small Great Things, you have a character like Turk. Turk is a white supremacist. It would be very easy to make him the villain and the person that you are inclined to hate 100% of the time. Certainly his views and his voice is pretty awful, are pretty awful. I remember when I was writing him, every time I finished a chapter in Turk's voice, I had to go downstairs and take a shower because I just felt dirty. And yet, Turk experiences one of the greatest losses that I can imagine as a human being. And when you see that happen in the book, you can't help but also feel empathy for him. And that's kind of what I mean about the world not being black and white. You may not agree with a person or their opinions, but on some level of emotion and feeling, you've probably experienced something they've experienced as well.
Marianne asks, has your extensive research caused you to do a complete about-face in your opinion or position on an issue?
Yes, but not in the way that you think. When I was writing Change of Heart, I was against the death penalty when I started writing that book. And I was against the death penalty when I finished writing that book. But I had spent an entire novel, the creation of a novel, poking holes in arguments for and against the death penalty. And so the reasons that I thought I was against it changed. It really came down to, do you or do you not believe that a person can change or can be redeemed? And if you really do not believe that a person can change and you are willing to extract them from the gene pool, then that's when you can say, I am in favor of the death penalty. If you do not believe that, then you have to stand against it. That's one example. The other example that is really relevant is Small Great Things. I spent 50 years of my life not talking about racism because I am a white woman and I grew up privileged and I do not have to. And frankly, that in itself is a privilege. But having done the research for this book, having explored so much about my own power because of the light color of my skin, I now can't stop talking about race and racism.
I've been the same since I finished
I
reading
understand.
it.
It's okay. It's okay, Georgia.
If you were not an author, what career would you choose?
I think I would be an amazing pastry chef.
Ooh.
Yes, it would probably be a lot less stressful as well.
Very good. Anita asks, many of your books have a controversial topic as a major influence. Have you written any of these as a result of something that has impacted on you personally or someone close to you?
Most of my books, I'm happy to report, have nothing to do with my real life because my characters live horrible situations and I live a very charmed life. However, there are two books that significantly impacted me on a very personal level. One was My Sister's Keeper. I did not have a child with leukemia, but my middle son was born with something called a cholesteatoma, which is a benign tumor that grows in the inner ear and will eventually burrow into your brain if you don't get rid of it. And we discovered this when Jakey was 5 years old. And the traditional way to get rid of it is to take down the ear canal wall, scrape out the tumor, and leave the child deaf in that ear. My husband and I decided to have him go through a more experimental surgery, one that was going to require more surgeries overall, but that might preserve a little bit of his hearing. And it turned out to be the right thing for us because he had a bilateral cholesteatoma. Only 9 kids in the US had that at the time. And as a result, at the end of 3 years of 13 surgeries, he was left profoundly deaf in his left ear and with marginal hearing in his right. And he has grown up to be completely functional. He's an amazing singer. His own surgeon doesn't understand why he can sing as well as he does, actually, and he's toured the world with a very famous a cappella group from Yale called the Whiffenpoofs. So we had this really happy ending. And yet, I remember so viscerally how the balance of power in our family was skewed when Jake was sick, how everything had to drop and turn on a dime for his surgeries, and that was what I wanted to write about. The way that when one child takes precedence because of illness or academic problems or social issues, that somehow turns the apple cart over. And we like to say we love all of our children equally, but in reality, sometimes one has to take the upper hand. And what we really mean is that we hope when every child needs us, we're there for that child. So that became My Sister's Keeper. The other book that meant a lot to me personally was Sing You Home. I was writing a book about gay rights and gay marriage in America at the time, and it was a very theoretical book for me. It was something that I supported and wanted to draw attention to, and I was doing my research when my son Kyle, who was 18 at the time, came to me with his college application essay, and in his essay he came out, and he handed it to me and he said, will you read this and tell me what you think? And I read it and I said, all right, so do you want to talk about the grammar or the content? And he said both, and I gave him a big hug and I said, Kyle, I absolutely love you. There's nothing you could say to me that would make me love you any less, and there's no way I could ever love you more. And Kyle had the happiest coming out story of all in America. There are a lot of kids who have not had that experience, and I ran into them every night that I did an event for Sing You Home. And all of a sudden, that book was no longer a theoretical exercise for me. When I was writing it, I felt so impassioned as a mom who really wanted to change the world for her kid. So those two books were very personal.
Gay marriage is not yet legal in Australia. What are your thoughts on this?
I do not think you can call yourself a first world country if you do not have gay marriage. I think if I were an Australian, and from what I understand, the vast majority of Australians advocate for gay marriage, if I were an Australian, I would be absolutely disillusioned with the political leaders who are obstructing this from happening. And I don't really care about political parties, and I don't care about how it gets done. It's this simple. Make it the law. That's it. If you don't want a gay marriage, you don't have to have one.
Lorraine asks, you tend to choose very emotive subjects. How do you make sure you don't cross the line between emotionally engaging and emotionally manipulative? Or is that something you don't worry about?
That's a great question, and of course I would worry about that. And the way to do it is actually my cheat, which is by using multiple first-person voices. I should never tell you what my opinion is on a subject. You can guess it, and I've had people come up and ask me for my opinion on a controversial issue. I'm always happy to tell you, but my opinion is no more valid than yours. However, when I'm writing about a controversy, I want you as a reader to see all different facets of that situation. And that sometimes means an opinion very different from yours. The easiest way to present all the different sides of a situation is by giving you multiple first-person narrators who are pleading their case to you as a reader. Then it's up to you to decide who's right, who's wrong, if you even can.
Sonia's question is, did you have a vivid imagination as a child? Do you study people and their mannerisms when you're out and about?
I did have a vivid imagination. My mom says the first book that I wrote, which she still has, was called The Lobster That Was Misunderstood, and I also illustrated it. I'm just impressed that I knew the word misunderstood at age 5, actually. But I can't say that as a child I was a real student of behavior, but I definitely am now, to the point where sometimes when I'm at the airport, I will just watch the body language between people, and I will make up entire back histories for them, just sitting there watching them. I think that's what all authors do.
Mel's question is, Jodi, if you could pick a book, any book, not just one of yours, which has had the most impact on you, changed you, made you want to read it again immediately, made you grieve for the characters, which would it be and why?
The book that definitely changed my life was Gone with the Wind. I was 13 years old when I read it. I used to act out parts as both Red and Scarlet, which is also why I didn't have a boyfriend until I was 15. And I loved it because I remember feeling everything that was in that book. I remember seeing and smelling and witnessing the burning of Atlanta through the language that Margaret Mitchell used. And it was the first time I felt incredibly transported by a book like that. And I really distinctly remember the moment when I kind of paused in the middle of reading it and said, I could do that too. And it was really the book that I credit with making me want to be a writer.
Debbie asks, when you were a child, what was your first memory or light bulb moment when you fell in love with the written word?
Probably that same.
No, because I was 13 then. Honestly, one of my earliest memories ever is being 4 years old and going to the library with my mom to get my library card. I had to learn how to write my name because I had to print it out in order to get a library card in America. My mom used to go to the library twice a week, and she would come home with these, tons of books in her arms, and I only wanted to do that myself. And I so distinctly remember being so proud of myself and feeling so grown up because I could get my own books.
Tasha's question is, do you ever get yourself emotionally overwhelmed when writing your stories?
100%. You know how engaged you are with the characters? I'm with them for 9 months, and so very often I feel just as strongly about them as you do. When I'm writing, I will cry sometimes. There are times I want to take characters and just smack them against a wall because they're just not thinking clearly. If you get invested in them after a week's worth of reading, you can imagine how I feel when I'm working with them for months at a time.
True.
And I don't try to make you cry, I swear.
Vicky's question, if you could give one piece of advice to an aspiring writer, what would it be?
It would be to take a writing workshop class. I am not of the belief that you need to graduate with a degree in creative writing or an MFA, but I do think you need to take a workshop class or several of them until you have a set of skills that every writer needs. One is the ability to write on demand, even when you don't particularly feel like writing. And the second one is to give and get criticism. And that's a really hard thing for a lot of people. They don't feel comfortable sharing their work. They don't know what to do when someone says, this part didn't work for me, they don't know how to fix it. Those are the tools you will go to the most often when you are a writer, and so you have to learn how to become your own harshest critic. And in my experience, having a good, strong workshop course where peers are reviewing your work and giving you a chance to revise and get a piece to the best level it can be is probably the most vital part of being a writer.
Angela asks, if you could switch lives with one of your characters, who would it be and why?
Honestly, none of them. Have you noticed how awful my characters have it? They have just the worst experiences. I live the best life ever. I live in New Hampshire. I have a fantastic husband, 3 great, smart, healthy kids, 4 amazing dogs. There is no one in my books that I actually would like to be, unless it would be like an ancillary character for a day. It would be really fun to be like Serenity Jones from, Leaving Time, but only for a day because she's kind of crazy.
Yep, I get that. Victoria's question is, reflecting upon each book you have written, which book was the hardest to write and why?
By far, Small Great Things was the hardest book for me to write, and it was because I couldn't ask all of my readers to unpack their own biases unless I had done it myself. And that meant a range of research that was very personal and very revelatory to me. I went to social justice workshops, for example, and I went there thinking, I'm a nice person, I'm open-minded and friendly, how bad could this be? And I left in tears every single night. And there were stories that were shared at these workshops that so deeply affected me. The Asian American woman who started to cry when she was talking about her love-hate affair with eyeliner because she couldn't use it easily on her features, but it was the standard of beauty that she had grown up with. The African American woman who said that she was so tired she had to get up every day and put on a metaphorical mask so that she could go out into the world and be the kind of black person other people could handle. And just once, she wanted to walk out the doors herself. These are things I will never have to deal with and never have to notice. And for me to realize at a very deep level that my ignorance of other people's feelings is a privilege itself. That as a white woman, I've never had to think or talk about these things. That was really eye-opening for me. You know, like I said, I spent 50 years of my life not talking about race, and I'm ashamed of that, and I don't want to be that person anymore. I mean, this book really inspired in me a sea change for who I am.
Judy's question is, are you as excited releasing a new story as your fans are anticipating it?
Absolutely. You know, it's kind of funny. People think, oh, it must get really old hat, you know, and the truth is, every time I get the first book off the presses, which is always sent to me in America, it's like giving birth. Just because you have, you know, 6 children doesn't mean you love the 6th one any less than the first one. You know, you still get so excited when you open that package and see for the first time that book in print.
And now, this is totally off topic.
My hair is very frizzy, even more so than yours. What do you do to look after those lovely curls?
So there's a product in America called Ouidad, O-U-I-D-A-D, and I sadly do not know if you can order it here, but you know, look, any curly-haired girl has a whole mess of products under her sink that do not work, and this is the first product that, honestly, I can say works really, really well for me. Climate Control by Ouidad. All I would say is if you can't get it in Australia, book a trip to the United States so that you can fill up a whole suitcase with them and then take them back home.
Jodi, do you already have an idea for your next book? Anything you can share?
I do know what I'm going to write about next, and no, I'm not telling any of you that. And that's a really interesting thing to actually talk about, because by now, by the time that I'm on tour for a book, I'm usually knee-deep in research for the next one. And although I know what I'm writing about, although I have a stack of books to do research and people ready on call for me, which will start next year, I haven't wanted to stop talking about small, great things yet. You know, like I said, this book was very different for me, and these characters still have their hold on me. This story and this issue is really critical to me and, frankly, to the world. And I can't stop the conversation quite yet.